Greetings and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Monday, June 13th edition of the Bottom Line Lexington podcast. The weather is as hot as this show, and we appreciate all of you for listening loyally. Big news coming out in Lexington sports-wise here Sunday night. Derek Willis, the UK basketball player, was arrested for public intoxication. And if you haven't seen his mugshot yet, I suggest you get to that quickly. It's rather amusing. Not on the Nick Nolte level, but still, you can just see he's got this grin on his face like he's saying, and that's fine. The kid's 20. He's almost 21. He had a few drinks. Who cares? I've heard Big Blue Nation this morning say, oh, we're going to be all over the news today. Dude, it's a 20-year-old kid who had a few drinks. He's not going to jail. He's not getting suspended. Slap on the wrist. If he played for Bobby Bowden, he'd be running some laps or something. No big deal. Just don't do it again. Summertime here means that all eyes starting to turn towards college football, thank God. The SEC SIDs, Sports Information Directors, came out with their preseason rankings over the weekend, and they have Kentucky football 6th in the SEC East out of 7 teams, ahead of, yes, you guessed it, Vanderbilt. Sounds about right to me. Mark's story came out today. You've got to come up with articles these days. If you remember last Tuesday, we had our Fluff Piece Tuesday edition. But Mark's story comes out today with the worst case scenario for Kentucky football, meaning that they lose that first game of the season at home against Southern Miss and Shannon Dawson, who's now their offensive coordinator. I don't necessarily see that happening. Southern Miss only has 13 returning starters. They do return their quarterback, who lit up BCS teams last year, who lit up Power 5 conference teams last year. They played 3 Power 5 teams. That quarterback got 363 yards passing on average in all 3 of those games and completed 66% of those passes in those 3 games against Power 5 teams. And they were 12th last year in yards per game. UK has 14 guys coming back, but they don't have a quarterback coming back. They have Drew Barker. We'll get more on him in just a second. But Mark's story is right. It would be worst case scenario. They lose that game to Southern Miss because you don't have many wins on that schedule as it is. In forecasting their season, I'm giving them the 3 cupcake games. One of those cupcake games, this one against Southern Miss. Our friends out in Vegas started this as a 7.5-point favorite for Kentucky. It's been bet down to 7, and we're still about 2.5 months until game time. My thing is, let this thing go to halftime tied up. Let this thing go to halftime, Kentucky only a 3-point lead or a 3-point deficit. Watch Mark Stoops run into that locker room as fast as he can to avoid that reporter on the field asking a mind-numbing question. Wait for the boos when that happens. A lot of people look at the game against Louisville as their biggest game, maybe the game against Alabama. You could argue it's the game against Southern Miss. With that in mind, Jen Smith, who does a great job covering Kentucky football, had a fluff piece on the quiet evolution of Drew Barker as quarterback of Kentucky. Great. There was one statistic in the whole article. It was all cliche. It was all conjecture. It was all, you name it, they had it. You name it, she came up with it. The one stat she had for the whole article, he made a 3.75 GPA last semester. Thank you so much. Is that supposed to tell me that he's a leader? Maybe he was taking basket weaving like Matt Leinart at USC. Who knows? Bottom line here is that Drew Barker statistically has proven nothing as Kentucky quarterback. When he was given a chance last year, he failed. And granted, they were against Vandy and against Louisville in a situation where he didn't have much of a chance. But still, he failed. And he did not play as well as Patrick Towles did last year. And we all know what happened with him. They talked to former UK football coach Rich Brooks last week. And what's the first thing he said about what Kentucky needs to do? They need better quarterback play. It's what we preach on this show every single time we talk about forecasting college football games. Who's your coach? Who's your quarterback? Those are the 2 biggest questions you have to ask any college football team. Do you have competent coaches? Do you have a competent quarterback? When you have a quarterback that started 1 game and failed at that game, and a coach who's 4-20 in SEC games, it doesn't paint a pretty picture for the upcoming season. A website called SEC Country came out with their SEC football contenders and pretenders for the coming season. I can't believe I wasted 5 minutes of my life reading this article. I just want to tell you how awful it was. The contenders in the SEC East, you guessed it, Tennessee, Florida, Georgia. The pretenders, Kentucky, Missouri, South Carolina, Vanderbilt. Duh! Who didn't know that? I can't believe I wasted space on my computer. I wasted a couple of clicks on my mouse, and I wasted maybe 2 minutes of my time reading this. Stuff I already knew. This is a website desperate for anything, apparently, this time of year. SEC East, pretenders and contenders. We already know this. Do I really need click on a website to tell me that Kentucky and Vandy don't have much of a chance in the SEC East? Thank you. You don't either, hopefully. Basketball news. Marcus Lee, formerly of UK, officially transfers to Cal. We've said it a couple of times on this show. Quanzo Martin, the coach at Cal, getting a lot of high-profile recruits, something that Cal didn't do for about 20 years, since the Jason Kidd, Lamont Murray, Tony Gonzalez days. Makes you wonder what's going on out there. But hey, it's just Cal. You know, a lot of people in this town killed Jerry Tipton of the Herald-Leader, and I have refrained because, you know, it's become cliche and it's become too easy, some of the things he writes. But he wrote something this weekend that I just can't let slip by. He compared Isaiah Briscoe to Oklahoma guard, now in the NBA draft coming up in a couple weeks, Buddy Hield. Yes, Buddy Hield, who won the National Player of the Year, the John Wooden Award. That Buddy Hield. He's comparing Isaiah Briscoe to Buddy Hield. You heard that right. Let me just take a look at just from their freshman year. Let's look at their stats. Buddy Hield, in his freshman year only, free throws, 83%. Now, he only shot 24% three-pointers, and that's okay, but at least he shot 83% free throws, so you see that there is some potential there to make shots. Player efficiency rating, 14.9. That was easily his worst season at Oklahoma. Was the writing on the wall for player of the year? No. But was there room for improvement? Absolutely. Isaiah Briscoe, free throws, 46% compared to Buddy Hield, 83. Three-pointers, 13%. Buddy Hield shot 24. Player efficiency rating for Briscoe, 10.3 compared to Hield's 14.9. What does all this say? You look back at Oklahoma this past season. Oklahoma that made the Final Four. Oklahoma that made the Final Four based on Buddy Hield alone almost. Oklahoma that made the Final Four based on Buddy Hield alone, who won the National College Player of the Year, the John Wooden Award. And you're trying to compare that to Isaiah Briscoe? Good Lord. That, my friends, is called homerism. And that is flawed logic. The numbers say no way. And that's what we look at here on the bottom line. We don't pay attention to cliche, conjecture, homerism, you name it. We look at numbers. We tell it like it is. People don't like us for it, but we tell you the truth. More basketball. Skal will work out for Boston, who drafts 3rd in the NBA draft, and Minnesota, who drafts 5th this coming week. Skal rising up NBA draft charts. Why is that? He has all these workouts where he plays so great. But what actually happens in these workouts? He runs around, he does these little drills, he shoots, he does his thing. He doesn't play against other people, though. He doesn't play against other NBA caliber players. He's not playing anybody one-on-one. He's not playing 5-on-5. He's just in a gym, working out really hard, but he's just shooting. He's just doing drills and shooting and all that. Does that typify who a quality NBA player will be? I want to see a kid that's been out in the wars. I want to see a kid who runs up and down the court, mixes it up, and can succeed and be productive in that setting. Anybody can have success working out in a gym, shooting 18-footers all alone, maybe with some ball boy or some manager in your face is waving your hand around. That's ridiculous. But Skal, he's got talent. He's going to rise up the charts the more they do that. But what people don't know, if you don't watch the game tapes from last year, you don't see how soft he is. You don't see how he doesn't show up. You don't see how Calipari did not trust him in big games and how he wouldn't play him in the biggest spots, in the biggest games. Go back to that game against Kansas, in Kansas. Skal didn't see the floor until he absolutely had no other choice but to go with him. Go back to that game against Indiana. Skal started the game, but he didn't play and he wasn't productive when he did play when it was crunch time and that lost to Indiana in the tournament. Yet he's about to be a top 10 NBA pick. I don't know Skal personally. I don't know any of these players personally. I'm sure he's a great kid. I've never heard anything bad about his personality. But to draft a kid in the lottery that got 6 points and 6 rebounds a game when he was given every opportunity in the world at one of the best programs in the country, I'm sorry. You just can't do it. But somebody will, and somebody will make a mistake. DeMarcus Cousins is now on the USA Olympic team that will play next month. This past year, Cousins 4th in the league in points, 5th in the league in rebounding, 11th in the league in player efficiency rating. Why isn't this guy already on the team? They need big guys. The Olympic team right now is filled with a bunch of guys who play the perimeter. They don't have any low post guys. Why isn't he on the team already? Because he's an immature jerk. That's why he's not on the team already. I hope I'm wrong. I see something really bad happening in this Olympics with DeMarcus Cousins. Remember in the Dream Team when Charles Barkley elbowed that dude from another team that they were beating by like 50 points at the time? Yeah. It could be a lot worse with Cousins. This Olympic team will be the first time a lot of people see him, literally since he was in Kentucky. 5 years of anonymity in the NBA? Let's see what happens. I fear the worst, to be quite honest. Belmont over the weekend, a horse named Creator won the Belmont, meaning that in the 3 Triple Crown races, 3 different horses won, which is horrible for the horse racing industry, struggling already. If you follow me on Twitter at BottomLineLex, you know that I had a winning exacta ticket worth close to $700. Very pleased with that. But horse racing season for people like me is now over until maybe the Breeders' Cup, but is really, in theory, over until next year's Kentucky Derby. There's a lot of different types of racing fans, horse racing fans. There's the ones that watch the Triple Crown races. There's the ones that watch the Triple Crown races and the Breeders' Cup. And then there's the one who goes to the off-track betting in the middle of July on a Tuesday afternoon to see if they could win some cash. I'm not in that crowd. I'm more in the Triple Crown crowd. It's just tough to make a lot of money betting on horse races. How many professional horse racing gamblers do you know? Exactly. The numbers are so weighted against you. But anyway, next time I watch a horse race, next year's Kentucky Derby. Reds lose yesterday to Oakland, 6-1. But it tops off a very impressive stretch for the Reds. They've won 3 of their last 4 series. They've won 7 of their last 11 games. Even with that, they're still only 24-39. If you had told me before the year that your top 2 players in terms of wins above replacement would be Dan Straley and Adam Duvall, who had that? I sure didn't. Jay Bruce, another home run, on pace for 39 home runs on the year. Can you believe that? The Reds will travel to my beloved home of Atlanta, Georgia, to face the Braves tonight, and we'll have more on that game in our Mac Daddy Stogie picks. NBA, Golden State up 3-1, will go for the series in the NBA championship tonight without Draymond Green in Oakland. By the way, do you know he has to pay, if Golden State wins, he has to pay $500 just to go out on the court after the game and celebrate since he's suspended. Really? A lot of talk about his suspension. Charles Barkley said that LeBron James deserved it. Kevin Love, who, for my money, he's playing his last game for Cleveland, no doubt, especially after this, he actually said that Draymond Green should not have been suspended. He is actually supporting Draymond Green. Who does that? Especially in the playoffs. Do you think Bill Laimbeer would have ever supported Scottie Pippen if Dennis Rodman had been suspended back in the day? No way. LeBron thinks way too much about everything he's going to say. He says he's going to take the high road in all this, but you don't tell people you're taking the high road when you take the high road. He thinks too much, and that's what gets him in trouble. It's what's always got him in trouble. That's why he doesn't win more championships, because he thinks too much. Play the game. Golden State now only a 5.5-point favorite tonight. The play tonight is either Cleveland or nobody. I think I've got to take nobody. Now that I've lost a point and a half in value with Draymond Green out, going back to Oakland, this would normally be a spot where you can take Cleveland and feel good, getting a lot of points. But I won't touch this game. It reeks of blowout against Cleveland. Other news, it looks like Art Briles may not be gone from Baylor yet. Now they're just thinking about giving him a 1-year suspension. You know why? Because they looked at their new coach, Jim Grobe, and they said, what's so special about this guy? We can't win football games with this guy. And then, more importantly, all these recruits that Art Briles, that used car salesman himself, had brought in to come to Baylor next year, and they're all skipping town. They're all decommitting. So, of course, they backtracked. Yeah, he's a turd for covering up all this stuff, but we're going to lose football games and lose recruits. We might want to bring him back. Total hypocrisy by Baylor. And I thought they were a Baptist school. Jeremy Foley, athletic director at Florida, will step down. What does that mean? Heck, I don't know. Since he was there, they won 3 national championships in football and 2 in basketball. He hired 4 football coaches in his time there. Urban Meyer, home run. Jim McElwain, looks pretty good after 1 year. Will Muschamp, dud. Ron Zook, an absolute running joke. Oh well, he kept that job for 25 years, so I guess he did something right. One thing he did do before he left was he made sure that the football field would be named after Steve Spurrier. I guess they couldn't name it after Ron Zook, so I guess they had to settle for Spurrier. By the way, Ron Zook was selling insurance a couple years ago. I'm not kidding you. When he got fired by Illinois, Ron Zook, who had 4 players drafted in the top 40 a few years back and was fired that year because they went 5-7. Just think if Kentucky had 4 guys drafted in the top 40 and still went 5-7. Well, nothing would actually happen there. Stoops would probably get a raise. Baseball, Clayton Kershaw last week, the best pitcher in the National League for the last 5 years, says he only cares about his performance, not about actual wins. And what he means by wins, he's not talking about his team winning. He's talking about the pitcher getting the win as a statistic. He could not be more right. The win is the most worthless statistic in all of baseball. Because it's not dependent on how well you perform. It's dependent on how your team offensively does when you have nothing to do with it. If I go out and give up 1 earned run and you beat me 2-1 and I get a loss, and then you go out and you give up 5 runs, but your team scores 10 and you win 10-5, who's the better pitcher? You're 1-0, but you give up 5 runs. I'm 0-1. I only gave up 1 run. The win is a useless statistic. It should be thrown out of baseball completely. But it never will happen. But one of the best things about the Moneyball revolution, the sabermetric revolution, is that voters for these awards, especially the Cy Young, don't look at wins first. Used to be if you won over 20 games, you were probably going to be in the top 3 for the Cy Young no matter what. But now, Felix Hernandez a few years ago won 13 games and won the Cy Young. That's where we are now. People have finally learned. So Clayton Kershaw is right. Somebody who's not right, Jake Arrieta. Jake Arrieta on one of the greatest runs in the history of Major League Baseball. You know what he says over the weekend? He says, if Madison Bumgarner is going to be in the home run derby, then I win in the home run derby too. See what happens when you let one person get a little bit of waves? All of a sudden, everybody wants in. You can't just let one pitcher in. You got to let them all in. Royals manager Ned Yost, yes, the world champion Royals, said he was surprised when his pitcher Yordani Ventura was suspended for 9 games last week. Ventura gets suspended at least once every single year he's been in the major leagues, and you're surprised? This guy really is dumb. How the Royals have won 2 straight American League championships and 1 World Series is amazing considering Ned Yost is their manager. But mark my words, they're not winning again this year. They only had probably one of the best bullpens in the history of the game. That's how they won. 25 years ago today, Michael Jordan won his first NBA championship with the Bulls when they defeated the Lakers in 1991. I remember being in school in Atlanta, and we were on the quarter system, which is 4 semesters a year, as opposed to the fall semester, the spring semester, and the summer semester at most colleges. And I remember we were taking our final exams, and we were all gathered around watching, kind of releasing some energy, so to speak, after our finals. We were watching this game, and there was one know-it-all there that says Michael Jordan will never win another one, and we're all killing him, saying he can't shoot, whatever, just being a snark. But still, it's funny to go back and look at that game the game they actually won the championship, people forget this. John Paxson had 19 points in the fourth quarter of that game. Because between the third and the fourth quarters, Phil Jackson went up to Michael Jordan and said, "Why won't you pass the ball? John Paxson is wide open every time you have the ball." And he was. So Jordan got pissed off and said, "Okay, you're going to be like that? I'm going to pass it to him every damn time." He did. Paxson knocked them all down. Bulls world champions. It's funny. Paxson brought that game home. He hit the game-winning shot in 1993 against Phoenix, that three-pointer. And then Steve Kerr, in 1997, hit a jump shot to win a championship that year. So 3 of those 6 championships, you could argue the player who won the games, the final games, wasn't Michael Jordan and wasn't Scottie Pippen. It was John Paxson and Steve Kerr. No wonder Jerry Krause thought he could win on his own. Fantasy football news, Tyler Eifert of the Bengals, who had surgery a few weeks ago, they said he will probably be ready for Game 1 this year. Now, that doesn't tell us when he'll be ready in the preseason, but it says that he'll be ready for Game 1 of the season. If you're playing fantasy football and you draft Tyler Eifert this year, I can promise you, you'll be disappointed. Yes, everybody sees that big number 13. 13 touchdowns last year. And that's great. But that's hard to repeat based on the way he plays. And when I say based on the way he plays, first of all, he doesn't play a whole lot. In the first 3 years he's played in the league, he's missed 20 games. And yes, he had 13 touchdowns last year. In the previous 2 years, he had 2 touchdowns. So this was truly out of nowhere. And how really good was he last year? Yes, 13 touchdowns, we get it. Remember Jacob Tamme? Everybody loves him around here. Jacob Tamme had more receptions and more yards last year than Tyler Eifert. And Jacob Tamme was a 3rd or 4th option for the Atlanta Falcons last year. And he's 31 years old. Rob Gronkowski, everybody loves him, right? He should be a first-round pick in your league. Based on scoring system, he should be a first-round pick in every league because he's that good and he's that much better than every other tight end in the league. Do you know how many times Rob Gronkowski has scored 13 touchdowns in his illustrious career, which, after 6 years, is the best of any tight end in the history of football? One time. He scored 13 touchdowns one time in his first 6 years. And you're looking for Tyler Eifert to repeat his 13 touchdowns from last year? And he's already injured and questionable for the first week? Good luck with that. You're on your own. I pass on Eifert in fantasy football this year, no doubt. Mac Daddy Stogie time. We're going to go to my hometown, Atlanta, GA. Reds, Braves. When these two teams get together, you can just throw out the record books. And in this case, we ask you to please throw out the record books. Reds 24-39. The Braves 18-44. What in God's name has happened to the Atlanta Braves? Ron Gant isn't walking through that door. David Justice isn't walking through that door. And Steve Avery isn't walking through that door. That's a shout out to the 91 Braves. My favorite team of all time, by the way. Starting pitchers tonight. Daniel Wright for the Reds, 7.20. Aaron Blair for the Braves, 7.13. Good Lord. Television ratings will be through the roof on this one, I can tell you. Braves have lost 8 of 10. Reds have won 7 of 11. Reds, as we know, struggle on the road, 7-20 on the year. And we talked about this last week. We went against the Braves in a game a couple of weeks ago when Milwaukee was in town, and we're like, when the Braves have been a favorite this year, they've lost every time. Well, they lost that game, and they're still winless when they're a favorite. They're 0-5 this year as a favorite. They're favored tonight. 120 over the Reds. You're getting 110 with the Reds. Daniel Wright, last 3 games, 5.06. Aaron Blair, last 3 games, 6.43. When Aaron Blair starts for the Braves, his team is 1-7 on the year. 1-7. I like my chances. Getting the Reds as a dog in Atlanta. Give me the Reds tonight. And this is a rarity. It's very rare when I take the Reds on this show. I have it for about a month now. Maybe longer than that. Give me the Reds plus 110 tonight in Atlanta at Turner Field. I wish I was in my old season tickets at section 142L out in left field. But give me the Reds tonight as your Mac Daddy Stogie of the night. And I wouldn't advise lighting up that Stogie in the 9th inning because of the Reds bullpen. Let's just wait till after the game on this one. But still, be ready to light up that stogie sometime tonight. And that's it for the Monday, June 13th edition of the Bottom Line Lexington podcast. Thanks as always for listening. Feel free to follow us on Twitter at BottomLineLex. Email us anytime, bottomlinelex@gmail.com. And feel free to follow this YouTube channel. Thanks again, and as always, may the winners be yours.